Time now to turn our attention to the international newspapers. Elena's with us here on set, and you're starting off with Tayyip Erdogan's Arab tour. How's it going down in the press?
Well, here in The Guardian, they aren't terribly impressed. Inside, they accuse him of opportunism and playing a high-stakes game. They say that Turkey is following what they call a neo-Ottoman imperialist policy, trying to regain the amount of influence and control in the Arab world that they had a century ago, during the time of the Ottoman Empire, of course. They say Erdogan has realised the quickest and easiest way to do that is to portray himself as the person taking the boldest line against Israel in the Arab world. And they say, while that might play well with the Arab street, the stakes are pretty high. He could completely alienate the US and other NATO partners. They say he does seem to be backing down a bit. He changed plans to visit Gaza after probably realising that might be just too inflammatory. But they say if he carries on this way, he might be popular in the Arab world, but he could totally alienate a lot of world opinion.
Now, a lot of the papers also talking about the financial world. This one's slightly different, though. It's some pretty sobering statistics in the US that you've pulled out of the New York Times.
Yes, this is the news that the number of Americans living in poverty has now reached its highest level in the 52 years that figures have been recorded. And the New York Times said this isn't just the product of the current recession that's been going on since 2008. They call it a lost decade because average incomes in America have now dropped to about the same level as 1993. They say policymakers should realise that because of high youth unemployment for both graduates and school leavers, because of companies outsourcing jobs abroad and cutting employment rights in the US and just cutting everything they can, they say, just to drive down lower wages, drive down costs. The American worker has been facing a crisis for at least the last 10 years, and their spending power is not rising. And it's not just the current recession that's the problem. It's an ongoing changes in the labour market that just don't look like being resolved anytime soon.
And staying in the US, Rick Perry, the potential nominee for the presidential candidate for the Republicans, he's got some fresh controversy.
This is over his use of the death penalty, which of course is already quite controversial. He's put to death 234 people in the 10 years he's been governor of Texas. That's rather a lot. Now, this piece in The Atlantic is about a man called Dwayne Buck, who is due to face lethal injection on Thursday. But legal experts are calling for him to have a retrial. Apparently, during his original trial in 1997, an expert witness told jurors he would be more dangerous because he's black. This was apparently, quite shockingly, accepted as testimony at the time and helped secure his conviction. But now the prosecution lawyer that helped secure that conviction is calling on the parole board for him to have a retrial, saying that in the original trial the judge came to a conclusion before the defence had even finished their arguments. But yesterday the Texas parole board threw out that appeal for a retrial, and so it looks like he will be facing the death sentence tomorrow. But it's interesting to see how Perry's run for the presidency and how much he's used his death penalty record as a campaign tool is focusing debate again in the US on that issue, which of course is normally in America taken for granted.
Okay, and a lot of US news today. In fact, a news story to do with victims of sexual abuse, filing a complaint at the International Criminal Court. What's the Catholic paper saying about that?
Let's have a look at La Stampa, which is a quite right-wing Italian paper that runs a site called Vatican Insider, and they say there's just no way that the Church and the Pope himself can be held responsible for the behaviour of a few priests. They say the Pope has condemned paedophile priests over and over again, and the people filing the suit are barking up the wrong tree.
And very quickly, The Guardian, they're talking about the French socialist primaries. A bit of a sexier view, though, than the French press?
Yes, literally. Their headline is Love Triangle in the French socialist primaries. They're talking, of course, about Ségolène Royal and François Hollande, who are now running against each other to be the socialist presidential candidate. They, of course, lived together for 30 years and had 4 children together. The paper says it was her decision to run for presidency in 2007 that put the final nail in the coffin of their relationship because she trampled over his presidential ambitions. Now, of course, he's the one leading the polls, so they say he may be taking his revenge. But quite what's going on between them, we don't really know. They say they were photographed looking intimate together at a recent party rally, which apparently infuriated Hollande's new girlfriend, a political journalist. So I'm sure this will give the papers lots to gossip about in the run-up to the primary, and it could make those debates particularly interesting.
We look forward to them, Elena. Thanks very much. Some sexual politics in the international papers from Elena. Thanks a lot.